Welcome to the Hawk Zone Rundown. We are going live tonight. Another episode of Pulse of the Hawks with Mookie Alexander back. We got a lot to talk about. Obviously, we started playing football last week. Game against the Raiders at Lumen Field. A lot of takeaways. So we're going to get into some camp takeaways. Where certain battles are at that we think are still going on, and maybe some battles that might be essentially over now already at this point. So we'll get into all that, plus a little bit of the Raiders Seahawks recap, because we all haven't touched on that yet, and we got a lot to say about that as well. Then we're going to look ahead and talk about the Chiefs matchup as well, and then we're going to get into something a little fun. Mike Sando came out with his quarterback tier list discussion, broke it up into 4 or 5 different tiers. So we're going to have some fun, break that down for you, and then I'll obviously get into a little more micro with Sam Darnold and a little Geno Smith comparison that Mike and Scouts have talked about. So all that and your Q&As, guys, flood the comments, and we're going to get to a lot of Q&As throughout the show. We love doing that on Pulse, so get him in there. So all that on the other side. Before that, make sure you guys go down, you subscribe to the channel, share the videos, like the videos. All that really helps the channel out. And you can also go down and buy us a coffee. It's another great way to support. So, guys, we're breaking it all down on the other side.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. And it's run. Corner run. One shot. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leon Washington. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does.
Is it going to be another 9-8?
We've got to fix something.
They have to fix the offense.
Part of his success and part of the ambition of being LOB
Want to hear that's trading DK Metcalf.
aggressive.
This is the Hawk Zone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Welcome back. Hey, man, I just figured we'd do a little throwback action with that intro for anybody that, is missing that intro. That goes back to, a little bit back in the day, maybe even before we had you on, Mookie, but that was a little throwback for everybody. And you know what? New season coming up. So there's going to be another intro in the works right now. So just to give you guys a little throwback action. But guys, what's going on, man? Pulse of the Hawks keeps on rolling. We're in full swing. The Raiders. It's just awesome to have football back. Mookie, you got a great new setup going on there as well, man. How are things going? What are some of your takeaways? Preseason takeaways, man, so far. And by the way, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Had a great time down in Seattle. I live in Oregon. I lived a great time up in Seattle with Bryce, Dan, and Brandon Kane over the past few days last week. Doing the Seahawks crossover podcast and just watching the scrimmage and watching the training camp down in Renton. So it was a great experience. And now I'm back home. This is not a new setup. It's a new setup for this show, but I use this setup for like other meetings that are sometimes not necessarily related to work, but I think it works a little bit better than me just shouting into my laptop microphone. But yeah, I'm just glad football is back, even if it's just preseason for the next couple of weeks. It's just to get us a little teaser, an appetizer, if you will, ahead of the regular season. And I guess it was kind of a fitting way for that first game to end with Pete Carroll back in town and Geno back in town. But really, Pete's the story. And for that game to end the way it did was somehow peak Seahawks and peak Pete Carroll all at the same time. And hey, it's a tie. Nobody won, nobody lost. I'm pretty satisfied with the outcome. I didn't think I'd care about the outcome, but for some reason I was rooting for a tie in the end.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was pretty fitting, and I'm just glad that we're not rolling the overtime stuff anymore in preseason. Anyways, they figure that out. Get out of there. Nobody gets hurt, right? So we're dealing with a couple injuries, nothing crazy, but yeah, man. So Bryce, man, early on, what's some of your preseason takeaways so far? I mean, I know we're going to touch on the Raiders game a little bit as well here, but just overall, obviously considering that game in the fold here. What's been some of your latest preseason just takeaways altogether here?
I think this offensive line group is going to be better than we initially expected this year. And I don't mean like minimally, I think significantly better. I think they have better depth here for once, which will be nice. I think there's going to be some surprises. Obviously, I think we'll touch on that in one of the next segments coming up here. But overall, like just John Benton, Rick Dennison, this entire offensive staff, I think, has changed the mindset and the culture on the offensive side of the ball after what we all saw last year, which was definitely a hard thing to watch. And I know for Mookie and myself, Brandon and Dan, we were at the training camp a few weeks ago. You could even see it in the practice, like the dedication to actually saying what they're going to do and then going out and doing it. And then we saw that in the Raiders game here. We saw them come out in I formation, under center, run the ball. And Mookie, you had that great stat that you sent to me about, you know, the fact that Geno Smith dropped back 6 times from under center all of last season, and Drew Lock dropped back 7 times under center in one game, which is just an astronomical difference in play calling. And the one thing I'll have to say, though, is, to be brutally honest, I believe that this Seahawks team, and my bold statement may come, you know, closer to being the truth of the matter, where this team could win 2 playoff games if these things start continuing to roll in the right direction, which they are, I think. And we'll see how that comes to fruition week 1, obviously, against the 49ers.
Yeah, hey, Mookie, I want to ask Mookie too. You know, Bryce, you talked about the offensive line going to be significantly better. The coaching is kind of the starts from the top, and we're excited about that as well. But, you know, Mike kind of made a comment too that, you know, not going to be, you know, these in-season battles. Like, they want to figure this out now and have that, you know, 5 guys set, and this is who we got, and the other guys are backups. Man, is that refreshing to hear as well? And we're not going to have to play this, you know, rotation game and just kind of, okay, these are our guys and the way it's looking. And as long as that health continues, you know, what does that give you more confidence with this line?
I don't know about more confidence, but I appreciate that we're not doing the song and dance like last year. To me, if you have 2 guys still vying for the starting job in the middle of the season, you don't have a starter. So we remember before McDonald, the Ethan Posick, Kyle Fuller center competition. And look, I know Posick was hurt, which he got hurt a lot in Seattle. No way around it. But like they were alternating seemingly every other snap, and then Posick got hurt, and then Fuller had to take the job for a little while, and then Posick came back. You know, the same old story there. But with Bradford and Haynes last year, like, you can't just do in and out of the lineup. They gave it a shot, and then they stopped doing it like in October or something. And this year, it seems pretty clear that there is a starter at right guard, and then at center, that's still to be determined. But I figure that whoever wins the starting job, that's going to be your guy for 100% of the snaps, as long as they're able. So yeah, that's good to me. Having some in-game continuity helps, instead of just randomly subbing in one right guard for another and seeing which one is better. So we'll see what happens with Bradford at Haynes through this week, and whether it's what we think it is as far as who's going to be the starter. But yeah, one of my takeaways, just to follow up on what Bryce said, I mentioned all the under center stuff and a lot of the offset eye. Like, the fullback is back, baby. No, the Seahawks didn't invent it. They're certainly not even the first one in the division to do this. But Robbie Oots, and just seeing him in offside eye so often, it almost brought a tear to my eye, as somebody who would play the old Madden video games, would just go into that formation over and over again and run toss sweeps. But yes, this is not going to be the Ryan Grubb offense, and I don't mean it's going to be guaranteed better. I expect it to be better, but it's going to be different. And that's what I wrote up on Field Goals 2 days ago. Well, today's Monday, right? I think I wrote it up Sunday. But the preseason with Grubb, they were running shotgun at an exorbitant rate. And I know Geno hardly played, but 5 snaps in the preseason. That proved to be a preview of what Grubb was going to actually do with the first team offense. So no, Clint Kubiak is not going to go under center 60-some-odd% of the time in the regular season. Teams do not do that anymore, because teams are going to shotgun. Even the teams that don't go under center, go shotgun a whole lot, their rate has increased over the last several years. But I think we're going to see more 12 personnel, see a little bit more 13 personnel, not unlike some of what we saw with Shane Waldron, but this is more proactive, because Waldron kind of had to do a lot of that in 2023 because of the injuries on the offensive line. This is on purpose. We got our starting healthy offensive line. We're still going to have 2 tight ends, maybe 3 tight ends. We might have 11 personnel or 12 personnel. We might have a fullback there. So it is going to be a different look. in terms of just the formation, the drop back passing, the play action rate, I have to assume is going to be different. So if that's what they're doing with Drew Lock through one half of preseason football, then I have a good feeling as to what we're going to see in the regular season in terms of just the formation rate, the personnel usage, and the play action rate. Because what we saw in the Raiders game was quite similar to some of what Bryce and I saw, and Dan and Brandon at the scrimmage and at practice. So like, this is not just talk as far as trying to get a better running game, as far as trying to, get under center more, use play action more. All of that so far looks like something that they have been working on and are putting their money where their mouth is. It's just a matter of, putting that to good use and making sure that this works out in the regular season.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, hey, talking about, the line, and then also what else we want to do with Kubiak's run the football. They kind of came out and talked about, we have a plan for Ken Walker. It's kind of one of those things that you just don't want to hear Ken and injuries again, but it's a foot thing, and they're taking it easy. It's preseason. Why run them to death anyways? But what are you guys hearing anything else about the foot? Is it a concern? I mean, obviously it's a concern for the Hawks as far as his future is concerned when it comes to paying this guy. I mean, or depending how the season goes, maybe they have leverage where they, hey, look, we want to sign you, but it's at this dollar amount. That's jumping ahead a little bit, but obviously that's part of the whole thing for him. How concerned about is it with Ken? Obviously we lost Kenny Mack a couple weeks back. So you got guys still, that room's still pretty good, but Ken Walker already talking about, limiting playing time. What's your guys' thoughts right now with Ken?
I'm not worried. Not yet. Until he starts being put on the injury report in the regular season, I think they always have to be cautious knowing his injury history. And also, Charbonnet is giving me way more confidence, in fact, than he did at the start of last season, where I thought, all right, Charbonnet it seems like he wants to be this powerful runner, but he doesn't seem to have any standout traits. But that second half of last season, I've been warming up to Charbonnet, and a reminder of why he was considered a top level running back draft pick taken in the early second round. So with Walker, we'll see how this goes with this week. Like, is he going to play any snaps against the Chiefs? Because that's realistically going to be the only time we see the starters in preseason. Is he even going to play in the joint practices against Green Bay? I don't remember if it's one or two practices. I think it's one. So if he doesn't play in that, then maybe they're really being extra cautious with Walker. But that's pretty much my take. I'm not going to be worried until it's time to worry as far as Walker, but it's not nothing that things like this are popping up. And he did practice 2 days ago, and they held him out. So they're kind of like doing NBA style load management as far as his practice with him. Maybe if this was an actual game, they would be like limited full Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's kind of the approach that I suspect that they're doing in training camp.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Ryan, to your point, we lost Kenny Mack earlier in this preseason here, this training camp. And, the big thing was, okay, we're down to like, how does this roster projection work out? Are we taking 3 backs only plus Robbie Utes? Does that mean we add another receiver? And in that game, George Halani kind of said, whoa, don't forget about me, guys. I've been here. And especially going up against his fellow running mate from Boise State there in Genty, George Halani put on quite a show and showed that he, in a lot of ways, can be a 3-down back. He blocks really well in pass pro. He can catch. He can run. He's got an explosive step to him. I think, the interesting thing is, and I'm not so worried. I fall under Mookie's thing. I'm not worried yet about Ken Walker. If we get to the week before the game and he's still nursing this foot, then I'm going to start having more concern to it. But at the same token, I think the more interesting story here, one of my takeaways is George Halani has really made a strong case to be that number 3 back and may have jumped Damian Martinez and pushed him to being on the roster bubble now at this point, because the other guy that we're not talking about, and he had a good game as well, is Jacadia Wright, coming out of kind of the blue, and everyone was kind of like, who's this guy? He's a camp body. Mookie, you and me saw firsthand down there at FanFest. He ripped off a few nice runs at the scrimmage there, and then he did it in the game again. So I don't think the Seahawks are necessarily that McIntosh injury initially looked really bad for the depth, but I think they have some nice pieces that they may be able to sneak through to the practice squad because, again, it's that massive one-day cut down period. The other thing for me that I think one of my takeaways here, and I want to get your guys' thoughts, is I think this receiver room is better than we initially thought coming into this season and fits this, scheme better than maybe we thought. And everyone's freaking out about, we need an X. We need a big X receiver. And I think it got shown, in the Raiders game for one, and through what we saw, Mookie, that no, you need to have really good route running and be a willing blocker to succeed in this offense.
Yeah, and I'm pretty confident, reasonably confident that Kupp, as long as his ankle is fine, is going to be a significant contributor to this offense. And no, he's never been a burner, but he knows how to get open. There are some guys who are absolute burners and can't get open. Otherwise, John Ross would still be in the NFL right now. Like having a 4.2 40 doesn't mean jack if you can't run routes properly. So that's kind of the thing with so many speedsters who bust out of the league. So Smith and Jigba, Kupp, we know that they can get open, short and intermediate. They've got that just pristine route running that you love to see. And then Tory Horton, that's as good as advertised, I think, for a preseason debut. 3 catches, 31 yards, and that touchdown, run a little stick route, finding the space, and that's a really good throw by Drew Lock, and then he's able to just spin for the score. And we know that he's going to be a factor on special teams to the point where if he keeps this up, I don't want him on punt returns or kick returns because he'd be too valuable to lose at the receiver position. So with MVS, his spot is a little bit dicier than I thought. Now, the fact that he didn't play at all in the Raiders game has me thinking that there's a chance that unless they're holding him for a trade, that he'll still be on the roster. But I think his role is going to be significantly reduced as the season goes on, as long as he's still on the team, and ceding snaps to Horton. Because as we saw last week, when they were in 12 or 13 personnel, 13 personnel with the ones, Horton was the only receiver. Or when it was 11 personnel, even when they're in shotgun, they're running 3 wide receivers. It was Horton over MVS, and MVS wasn't injured or anything. So, yeah, the receiving group, they're going to be some tough cuts to make. And that's kind of the thing. Tough cuts even on the offensive line, which I never thought I'd say, because it feels like the Seahawks can barely muster up 5 offensive linemen worth rostering to begin with. But at wide receiver, I think it's pretty clear that you've got JSN and Kupp, and Horton's a lock. MVS is a little dicier. Bobo, I think, is a lock, especially for his value as a blocker. He's still a guy who's got the ability he's got great hands. So I expect that Bobo is still going to be part of the team. But then after that, it's like, what becomes of Derek Young? I think Cody White's kind of in a tough spot now. Ricky White seems like a long shot, but there are a couple of guys where you go, yeah, we'd like to see them on the practice squad for sure. So I don't think this is like a top 5, top 7 wide receiver group or anything, but they're going to be at least functional. And if the wide receiver depth is not what we think it is in the regular season against live action against teams with better depth than the Raiders, then the hope is that AJ Barner continues to be a good 2-way tight end, and that Elijah Arroyo kind of functions as another big-bodied receiver. So even though he is nominally a tight end. Just one point on the running back stuff. I don't want it to make it seem like one game decides everything with Martinez and Holani, and it's possible they roster 4 running backs. But what Bryce and I saw at FanFest the week before, Holani was getting more run with the 2s than Martinez was. And the day before that, and I don't want to read too much into it because, there's a whole lot going on as far as the rubric when it comes to identifying who makes the grade and who gets more playing time. But Martinez fumbling the ball on I think a play Julian Love stripped him and Byron Murphy was able to recover. So we know that Pete Carroll had an interesting history as far as who could and who couldn't get away with fumbling quite a bit. So Chris Carson in that 2019 season fumbled every other week and he never got benched. But guys like Kristen Michael in practice, bad ball security, you don't see the field. So I don't know how Mike McDonald is as far as ball security from his running backs, but we know that Kenneth Walker's only fumbled 1 time in his career and Charbonnet's never fumbled. So Martinez fumbling the ball at practice a week ago and then muffing a kick return. Like, I feel like something is up that the fact that I even used him in kick return to begin with, because nothing about Damian Martinez's style lends itself to being a kick returner. It's like Jermaine Kearse kick returning. So yeah, there's so much to dive into on the offensive side of the ball in terms of tough cuts to make at the skill positions, running back and receiver, and also an offensive line. It's exciting. Not exciting that, oh my God, people are going to lose their jobs. Of course not. Exciting because there's a lot of young talent on this team that you want to keep around, even on the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think personally, I think MVS is a lock. I just don't think he's going anywhere. I think also Cup. I mean, it's gonna come down to health, right? We all know he can play ball. I mean, that's just not a question. I think that nobody thinks the guy's washed. It's just, can he stay healthy? That's the number one thing. So I think the Seahawks know that too. I think if you kind of like, I really hope he stays healthy, because I think if he is healthy, he's gonna be a huge contributor. But again, like, if he does go down, you still have another veteran receiver. I like Tory Horton too. I think he's going to be a good young receiver, but I think to just bank on him, just being like, yeah, he's a burner, he can do this. Like, I think, and MVS is been in this league for a while now, and I think experience plays a huge role. So I personally think he's locked in. I think Bobo, I agree. I think he's got some versatility and what he can do. I think Derek Young, man, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him again. I think it's just going to be a numbers game again for him. So yeah, but for me, I think you're pretty set. I think I'm with you, man. I'm excited to see what happens. The Ken Walker thing, I'll take, like you guys said, man, we'll get a little more worried as we get closer to the regular season. But yeah, I mean, overall, guys, what do you think? Camp battles, Bryce? Any that you think are like just coming into camp here, we were like, okay, this is a battle. Anything now where you're just like, nah, you know what? It's essentially, for the most part, over.
Yeah, the one for me that stands out is the right guard position. I think it's essentially over at this point. I think it's Anthony Bradford's job, and I basically said it in our chat, Mookie, that we have, that I think he would have to basically fall on his face in the Kansas City game, and Haynes would have to play a perfect game to have a shot at getting really back into that competition for the starting job. Like, up until the week that me and Mookie were down there, they were splitting reps. It was rotation constantly between those guys, and there was a lot of juggling. And then all of a sudden that week that we were there leading up to it, we heard from Dan that Bradford had taken more of the first team reps. Then the day that we were there, Haynes got injured. He injured his pec, and they basically put him at center, and Bradford took all the first team right guard reps. And that is stuck through the game and through this week now. And I've got a feeling it's basically, they had Haynes working as a 2 right guard. They've moved Cable up to being the second left guard and bumped LeMaya down to third left guard, which is interesting in its own right. And Sundell hasn't played much guard now, even though he was bouncing around a bunch because Olu's been out in an injury capacity. So Sundell's been first team center. So the thing I'll say about Anthony Bradford, and I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that are terrified of this. I was one of the people last year that was very hard on Anthony Bradford and thought, he wasn't going to be someone that was going to make the team. I said that earlier this offseason. I thought Bradford was essentially done. Bradford has done a remarkable job, I think, in a lot of ways. One, changing how he is built. He's leaned out. That was one thing I think me and Mookie both talked about, was how much leaner he looks. And his fundamentals look better. He's not lunging. He's not leaning as much. And this system, too, I think is going to help Bradford, because it's not going to ask him to necessarily deal with straight dropbacks. The pocket's going to move considerably with the boot action, with the play action. And the quarterbacks also in this offense don't have a lot of deep shot plays built into it. Like, it's not all vertical 10 to 15 yard concepts, everybody with one little check down. Like, as we saw in this game with Drew Lock, that ball is coming out very quick. And that's one thing we've heard this week too. And Mike McDonald talked about it today in his press conference, was Sam Darnold is doing a remarkable job of getting the ball out on time. And he's saying it's even frustrating him and the defense how to create pressure on Sam because the ball's out so quick. So when you add those things together, and we already know Anthony Bradford is a very good run blocker, and we saw that, you're kind of going in the plus direction. And that's where I think this is Anthony Bradford's job. And it's his job to lose now at this point. So I think this camp battle, the right guard one, is all but over now at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely over to me, because last Friday, I think it was. So that was the Renton practice where we were there, and we noticed Haynes not getting any reps, but you didn't notice anything on his left shoulder, no strap or anything. And then we saw it on Saturday. Well, I say you saw it on Saturday because you have got like the most perfect vision anybody has ever had. But with Haynes, we noticed that he was at the other practice field. He was taking some snaps at center. And look, I know McDonald said that Haynes was in the center competition. There is no center competition involving Christian Haynes. It's Olu and Sundell. Like, there's no chance of Haynes being anywhere near those two. And that Haynes played all of the Raiders game at left guard tells me that he's not really factoring into the right guard competition anymore. So I think that bit is done. I still think he'll be on the roster because you'd be thinking, all right, with the Bradford, Haynes, and Sundell trio all there, like, are they going to keep all three? Like, whoever loses out on a starting spot, is one of them going to get cut? I think with the way that the roster has changed a bit the last few days and could change the next couple of weeks, I think they'll keep all three, but it's not a given, but I think it's more likely than not. But with Haynes, yeah, he might be best suited to a zone blocking scheme because it's the same scheme that he ran at UConn, but sometimes it's a miss. I mean, it's not over yet for Haynes, but just because you fit the scheme in college doesn't mean that it directly translates to NFL success, because Scott Huff, that was not Scott Huff, it was Grubb who said last year he needs to work on his strength and technique. And I have a feeling that might be kind of the same thing that's going on right now, where Bradford is a strong dude. Like, there's no denying that. It's just sometimes he can be a bit slow in pass protection, where he can kind of get off balance in pass protection. But yeah, as you mentioned, his run blocking is better than his pass blocking. And really the big issue with Bradford was just the penalties that he was taking through the first several weeks of the season. Now, what can change this year beyond Bradford's individual performance is having more stability at center, meaning Olu or Sundell. So for the sake of this argument, let's go with Olu. And then having Abe Lucas week 1. Now, with Bradford, I don't think he started in 2023 week 1 right away. Was Phil Haynes still on the team? I think it was Phil Haynes who was starting at right guard at the time. So Bradford only came in like a few weeks into the season. And I think shortly thereafter, well, actually, Lucas was already out, right? Lucas played week 1 and then Gonzo for much of the season. So this is going to be the first time, knock on wood, nothing screwy happens over the next few weeks. This is going to be the first time that Bradford is next to Lucas day 1. And I think that's going to be a help to him. So we'll give Bradford another shot, and hopefully it goes well. He doesn't have to be an all-pro. I know Dan Vians mentioned it on his show last night. You're not going to have 5 all-pros. You're not going to have 5 pro bowlers. You're always going to have a weak spot somewhere. There is no there's no Super Bowl team where there is just perfection or elite play everywhere. You're going to have some spots where not so good. I can live with 1 spot out of the 5 being not the greatest if it means that the other 4 spots are at least competent. So if Zabel can look as good as he did against the Raiders and translate that to the regular season, I trust that Cross and Lucas, as long as they stay healthy, are going to hold down the fort like they normally do, and that Oluwatimi or Sundell, they won't be liabilities out there. So that's a lot different than having backups around Bradford and then everything looks all out of whack. So yeah, I think that's the one camp battle that is realistically over. And then we don't even touch fullback anymore because Russell's essentially a tight end. He's back to tight end. He's not a fullback. Robbie Utes is the guy. I'm just trying to think of anything else, really. No, it's pretty much up in the air. Still a running back, bottom of the depth chart, wide receiver, bottom of the depth chart. I'm wondering a bit about backup tackle, though, because Amari Kite's getting all this tackle work, and even over Jarrell, I did not see coming. And then Lomea is also somebody who I think is now on the bubble. I know Bob Condotta of Seattle Times thinks he'd get cut. He was not good in pass pro at all last year. Good with the GT counter once Ryan Grubb discovered it the same way man discovered fire. But like, what else from there? And you got Richmond and Cable Dew in the fold, and Cable Dew has been working at guard, and Richmond's been working at guard and tackle. Lomea hasn't been doing any tackle stuff from what I remember throughout camp, whether we've been there or not. So I think positional versatility is going to be so key for the guys at the bottom end of the depth chart, and Lomea might be the odd man out because of that.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say too, watching that game, and I've watched it a few different times, Cable Dew and Richmond both played extremely well when they were in the game at both spots, which I think is why you're seeing them get the added, Richmond, I think, was working at right tackle with the 2 unit this week, and Cable Dew at left guard with the 2 unit, and then Kite at left tackle. I think there's, it's going to be interesting for guys. And I said this earlier when we came into this training camp that I thought Jarrell and Lomea could be bubble guys. LeMaya really struggled on, Thursday night versus the Raiders. And it wasn't like we're talking the Raiders did anything crazy and fancy and we're stunting all over the place. And no, he just struggled with straight up pass pro. And even some of his run blocking wasn't that great. And again, he isn't one of the guys. And that's one thing I always go to is John Benton came in and picked Cabledew, Zabel, and Richmond. He didn't pick LeMaya and Jarrell. And so he may never have picked them if he had been here because they may not have been guys he was interested in. If you look at the Richmond, Zabel, and Cabledew thing, the biggest thing I can say there are starts and consistent starts and versatility. And to your point, Mookie, moving between guard spots, yeah, it's a little bit of versatility, but moving with the ability to put Cabledew out at tackle and then kick him into guard, and same with Richmond. And you know what? If Kite's a better tackle at this point, because Josh Jones, I think, is a lock to make this roster. I don't think that's a question. If Kite's a better developmental tackle than Mike Jarrell, I think there's a good chance you can sneak a Div 2 player through to the practice squad if you really had to.
Yeah. Hey, look, man, let's kind of keep it rolling along here and touch on that game too. I know we sort of it's all tied in together, right? But we're talking Raiders and Seahawks, and we know the game was a few days ago now, but it's the first time we all get a chance to talk about it. And Pete's return was the big lead up, and that was awesome and exciting and weird at the same time to see him in Raiders colors, but cool as well for Pete to be back in the NFL. Kind of go around, talk about, I know we talked about Robbie Utes and some other great young guys that played in that game. Man, we haven't touched on, and I'm going to start things off because we haven't touched on Jaylen Milrod yet. And I know there's been a lot of hype leading up to this game. He got in, played a lot in the second half. And just kind of as we expected, right? Ran a lot. They brought him in, got him comfortable, but man, just you kind of get excited, and to have this guy developing in your system, arguably the best athlete on the team. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. And man, my biggest takeaway off the field too for me is when you hear the guy in the press conferences, you want to talk about saying all the right things, and you could see this kid, like you could be like this guy could be a potential leader, and the hard work and the dedication that you see that he's all about, that is also gets you excited, because you can be a phenomenal athlete, be at the quarterback position. You don't have those other intangibles, it's only going to go so far. So that really gets me excited to be that young, and really this guy just seems to have it all put together as far as what to say. And it's not scripted, right? It feels authentic, right? Like, a dream come true playing my first game in the NFL. And, we all know what script it's like. And, look, I love the guy when he was here, but, Russell Wilson was the definition of PR scripts, and it got old and tiring and fake, right? And with this kid, when he stand up at the podium, man, it just feels real, authentic. So I was just pumped and excited, and I felt like he played well, like, considering. What do your guys take away? Touch on Jaylen to start off, man, and you excited for the potential with this kid moving forward? Or what did you think, man?
Mookie, you go first.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Milrod in the second half is that was the slop portion of the game. So there were fewer possessions for him to do stuff. And certainly the penalties that didn't help, like Brady Russell wiping out a big Jacardier Wright run with a kind of a needless hold. Like, Russell was really not at his best in that game, but I think he should be fine to make the team because of his special teams value. And I think there were some other penalties that negated plays and essentially killed drives for the Seahawks. So we didn't get to see the most of Milrod. I think we'll see him quite a bit in the Green Bay game at the very least. Kansas City remains to be seen, because we don't know if the starters will play, and we don't know how long the starters will play if they are in the game. But you could see the athleticism and the speed when he's running the ball. I think about that read option keeper he had for 27 yards. It was adding on to the 5-yard. There was a penalty on the Raiders, so technically it was the longest play of the game for the Seahawks on offense. And just the way that he handles the ball and can use that deception and then take off so effortlessly. Like, that's the part of Milrod's game that I've never knocked. I've 100% knocked, including on this podcast, his inconsistencies as a passer. So I'm not going to hide from that. I specifically said back in December, I want nothing to do with Jaylen Milrod. And guess what? it's time to root for Jaylen Milrod, but got to give him a chance. Like he obviously says a lot of the right things, and I have no doubt that he is very self-determined to keep improving. And if he does improve, then that means I get to dump all over Kalen DeBoer in the same way that many scorned Huskies fans might. But you can tell that his arm is lively. I like that throw he had to. It wasn't Broden. It might have been to Ricky White, actually. And it was a tight coverage throw. I think that his mechanics are still in need of a little fine-tuning. And as much as he can be elusive, I suspect that if you were to give him first-team reps right now, he would be bleeding sacks. So I have no issue with him getting these third-team reps. It would be cool if he got some second-team reps, because I don't think he's gotten any in training camp, and he certainly didn't get it in the preseason game. But just to see what happens if we level up just a tad. So with Milrod, I thought it was a good debut. Nothing spectacular, but it wasn't really his fault. It was just that the way the game played out, there were fewer opportunities for him. I also want to note that when he entered the game, Kubiak called a lot more shotgun, except for the touchdown drive where they had Tyus and Wright. And that's not surprising given the way Milrod played at Alabama. It's something he's more comfortable with. But I think that just with the under center play action stuff, the boots, I think that's another way to utilize Milrod. And the Seahawks would be foolish to not use Milrod as a red zone and short yardage threat. There's just no excuse as far as not tapping into that part of his game. As far as his passing, we'll see. I think that's going to take some time, but there is NFL-ready use in one part of his game at quarterback, and that's his running ability and the ability to get the type of yards that really Darnold and Locke probably can't. Not even probably can't. Definitely cannot. They're just not as mobile.
Yeah, for me, honestly, watching Milrod, there were two throws. There was the bootleg throw that he made to Broden, and then there was the throw he threw up on the basically concept of like a hammer concept or hit concept where your inside tight end slot runs essentially like a stick route, and your outside receiver runs that deep dig, and he threaded the needle on anticipation, got to the top of his drop, let the ball go, and it was perfect. And so the one thing I'll say, though, Mookie, is you look at that Friday that we were there to that Saturday, he had a rough Friday when we were there. Like he made some bad decisions, couple jump passes that I think he wishes he didn't do. But then coming to the Fan Fest, you saw improvement. You saw there were corrections in just that short period of time. And then you saw it again in the Raiders game. And the thing I will say about Milrod is there's some people out there going, oh, I wish he went through his progressions more. And so he's a rookie quarterback that's still learning all this. Him taking off and running for 10 yards, I'm not going to complain about. I'm not going to get mad about that because, oh, we missed a guy that was open, right away, 5 yards in front of him. The fact he got back, he made a decision and took off and did something in a positive manner, I'll live with that for the first year. I still think he's 2 years away from being a viable starting option for this team. And that's another full offseason of being an NFL quarterback, NFL training, and all those things that'll come with it. But to your point, he has to be involved in short yardage plays this year. Like I said when we were down there, I would love to see a backfield when we're third and less than 5 come out where you're going to be in shotgun and you're going to have Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet flanking him on either side, and you've got your tight ends in there, and it's basically like the old Carolina Panthers with D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart and Cam Newton, and we're going to go QB power or we're going to go read option, and then you have the ability to throw to one of these tight ends because a guy that I'll say that impressed me or has impressed me so far in camp is AJ Barner. And I thought, AJ Barner, it'd be interesting to see how they use him, but watching him at camp, even I know he didn't play in the game, he's going to be an interesting factor in this offense. But, my point to the Milrod discussion, I think you need to start giving him second team reps. We know what we have in Drew Lock. Drew Lock proved he's Drew Lock still in some respects. The interception he threw was on him. He still had a clean enough pocket to make a good throw and not even make that throw. You're in field goal range. Don't take an unnecessary, risky play. Just check it down. Let the field goal team come out and put up 3. I would rather say that I'd rather after Sam Darnold plays this Chiefs game or the start of it, put Jaylen in there. Like, it's not going to hurt Drew. There's no development for Drew. Drew's your backup quarterback. We all know, but get Jaylen an opportunity with the number 2s to see what he can do with that group. And then that gives you a better idea going into that Green Bay game on who you're going to divvy up the reps or how you're going to, because we know Sam won't play in the Green Bay game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And also, I noticed, and we both noticed, whether it's 11 on 11 in practice or the actual game, when Milrod doesn't see his first read open, he's taken off. I don't want to make these comparisons constantly, but like it took Russ, I swear, like 4 or 5 years to not do that. That was kind of the knock on Russ is, yeah, as dangerous as a runner he is, he's missing some open receivers because he's taken off after his first read isn't covered, or his first read isn't open, rather. I think that with Milrod, it's just making better decisions because some of the picks that he threw last year, particularly the Oklahoma game, were awful decisions. I don't think he's a slow processor or anything. I think I said it a few pulses back that slow processing and bad processing aren't the same thing. And there are some progressions that he's got to work on is short distance mechanics, because some of the throws that he missed in practice were shorter throws, not the longer ones. In fact, some of his best throws were the deep passes to Broden, one to Steven Sims. So he's got that. Even in the scales at just one-on-one, throwing one to John Rice Plumlee over Waxter. Like, he throws a pretty ball. There's no questioning that. It's just some of the other quarterback stuff that needs to be worked on, where there can be something there. I'm willing to I'm not going to be stuck in my ways just over takes I had several months ago. So let's move it slowly along with Milrod. There is no rush. There's no rush to see if he's a starting quarterback right now, because you already have one in Darnold. It'd be a lot different if they had jettisoned Geno and they brought in Drew Lock and the quarterback one was Lock, Milrod, and random third guy. Then I'd be a little bit more nervous. But in this case, I'm totally fine with just slow playing it in the way that kind of Philly did it with Jaylen Herz that first year. And then I think they had to play because Wentz was just abysmal. And just let it play itself out. I don't want any quarterback controversies happening whenever Darnold has a bad throw or a bad game, because it will happen. And then people are going to start Milrod now. Like, let's not do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that happening much. I mean, you're gonna hear it, but I see it as, I think his development's just gonna, like you said, give it time. But I think the Seahawks are just gonna see how it plays out. Like, if he develops quicker than, like Bryce, you were saying Friday he did this, Saturday was much improved. Like, I think if his development continues to ascend in faster than we think, and depending on how Sam goes throughout this season, and then if you start having this defense that who knows if we get a game record on the outside, and this defense becomes all of a sudden a top 3-2 defense going into 2026. I don't know if I can call it. I think there's a lot of moving pieces. If Sam comes out and he's kind of mediocre at best, you're like, okay, wait a second. And Jaylen starts really developing. I mean, I don't know, Bryce, I agree. I mean, ideally, if Sam continues, like if he plays something like close to last year, and then you can just bring Jaylen along, then I'm fine with 2027. But I think there's some moving pieces. If he starts developing quick, this defense starts really taking off, and you have the offensive line improving, the run game's on point, then, you bring up Russell Wilson. What did he have to do early on? There wasn't really a lot of pressure on Russ. It was manage the game. We have beast mode in the backfield. We got an all-time defense. Just don't screw it up, right? Be that ultimate game manager. I know, Bryce, you talk about, hey, that's what a quarterback's supposed to do. But all you have to do, all the pieces are here for you. It's on a silver platter. So, we're not Legion of Boom right now or anything near it, but we potentially could have a really, really good defense. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's exciting, at least. I'm not putting in a lot of stock and his stats or I expect him to make a lot of mistakes early on, but I just think for me is like, how are we going to see, how is he going to progress as we move on? I think that's what's exciting about coming into this year. There's a lot of unknown still, right? Like Sam essentially is kind of on another prove it year, right? No, there's nothing locked like, oh, this is how he's going to play. I think all three of us agree, like it's a wait and see how he's going to come out and play. Right. So, but yeah, overall, I'm excited, man. I'm excited for this kid. I'm excited for the room.
I'll say this, after what I saw at camp of Sam and what I've heard from Dan and Corbin and everybody, I will be very, very surprised if Sam Darnold falls on his face. Like, a lot of people think he seemingly will, and we'll talk about Mike Sando's list that kind of comes up, but the one thing that stood out to me the most.
Just be clear. I don't think it'd be a fall on his face. I just mean.
Oh, no. But I'm just saying in general. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I'm just saying I think Sam's more on a 2-year deal than he really is on a 1-year prove it deal.
Right.
Because I don't think Jaylen's going to grow enough progressively as a quarterback. Like athletically, 100%. He's the most talented quarterback on the team.
Yeah.
But the thing with Sam, and I think Mookie, you can back me up on this, Sam's accuracy stood out greatly at those 2 days that we were there. Like, he puts the ball more times than not in spaces where only the receivers can get it, and it's on time, and it's very catchable. The one thing I'll say about Jaylen that I think came out in a lot of the stuff I was watching with the quarterback drills and the 7-on-7 is Jaylen right now has about 1 speed on the ball. He doesn't, unless he's throwing a deep rain ball, if it's anything that's got to be on time and it's like it's coming fast and hard at you, he's still developing some of those things where when you watch Sam, you can see him layer in tempo throws, and Drew can do it as well. But Sam does it and makes the right read at the same time. And sometimes you see what you get with Drew where he is late on that out route that gets intercepted. But let's move on to the Chiefs, guys.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the game coming up, this Friday. We're playing Kansas City, and the starters, it sounds like, are going to get some run this week and against the Chiefs. And, that'll be the test. What do these guys look like? What is this starting group? Because remember last year when the starters got their run versus Cleveland, everyone thought we were going to have the greatest show on turf offense, and we certainly did not. So, Mookie, what do you think? What are you looking for in this Seahawks-Chiefs game coming up?
Definitely anticipating the offense the first team offense, that is, to get at least a series. I'm wondering how McDonald's going to play this, because I don't know how he was affected by Nwosu going down in the one series that the defense played with the Wyatt Teller chop block and everything that happened from there. But in the olden days of NFL preseasons, we'd be talking about the starters getting like a quarter, if not a quarter and a half of game time. So it would be something a little more bang for your buck if you're a fan. But this Chiefs defense, assuming that they're playing their starters, is not the Raiders defense. I do not anticipate the Raiders having a good defense this year. And it's not just I'm not taking a shot at Pete. I just think that there's still a huge talent gap for the Raiders to overcome on the defensive side of the ball. But the Chiefs defense, no denying that they've got talent everywhere, whether it's Bolton at linebacker, whether you got Karlaftis and Chris Jones on the defensive line, and then you've got Trent McDuffie and Watson in the secondary. So they've got guys all around that are at least competent, and in Jones's case, among the best in the business. So just to see what happens when there's a little bit more pressure, because I don't think that outside of Max Crosby, the Raiders really have a truly great second guy, and they played one series. So are we going to see more twist stunts? It's Spagnuolo. I know Spagnuolo is just a mad scientist out there. Is he willing to be a mad scientist in preseason? Because I want to see if there are going to be any games that he does. Is he going to blitz more? How is Darnold going to handle that? Because we still, as accurate as Darnold has looked throughout camp, let's see what happens, if at all, if things get a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket. How is he going to handle that? Because most quarterbacks, when they're flustered, they're not going to be great. But with Darnold, I think there was a significant DVOA difference at FTM Fantasy as far as how he was without pressure and with pressure. So that's going to be something I'm going to be keeping my eye on. And then just as we get deeper into the game, this third running back competition between Martinez and Holani, and seeing who's going to have that edge. And on the defensive side of the ball, who's going to step up from like the second and third team? Because the third team, they were pretty awful. Outside of Jared Ivey and like Connor O'Toole, the secondary in particular was deeply disappointing. So we know that there's pretty much no depth there to write home about. But for the second and third teamers, like this is another big opportunity for them at home. And even after Mahomes is out of the game, Gardner Minshew's been a starter for a good while in this league. So you're going to have, like, similar to last week. Yeah, Geno first years and then Aiden O'Connell for a bit. You'll have Mahomes, and then you're going to have Minshew after that. How is the defense going to hold up? So, again, I don't care about the final score. I do care about individual performances and looking well coached. So, yeah, this should be a nice litmus test entering the end of preseason, because when the Packers game happens, they'll be scrimmaging for a day or two, however many days. And then I anticipate that the actual Packers game, it's just going to be 2s and 3s all the way. So we're not going to glean a whole lot from there. So what I hope is that the camp battles that McDonald has referenced and that we've referenced on this show are decided by the end of this week.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I just think I want to see Sam just come out and see how he performs a little bit under pressure too. I just hope, there's a little bit of attack on him and just kind of see how he works out of that. But yeah, I mean, overall, just want to see how this line holds up, and mostly I'm going to be focused on the offense. Yeah, and that's really only thing I'm looking for. Like you said, Mookie, I mean, it's hard. I just want to see some consistency, more than anything, because last year was like you mentioned, Bryce, that Ryan Grubb game, and man, we were all jacked and excited, and then it was nothing like that. So you take it with a grain of salt too, right? Sort of what you see. Don't get overly excited, but watching individual performances and kind of take away what you want from it. But yeah.
Yeah,
all right, guys. Well,
I was going to say, did I hear sirens in the background? Yeah, because just merely mentioning Grubb, somebody called 911 instinctively.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that, please. Better resource usage.
Don't bring up his name ever again on this show.
He can't hurt you anymore. He's at Alabama, unless you're
now. Here's my question:
Bama fan.
Does Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff's name go into the D.S. Scridge kind of vault there of names that we do not speak in Seahawk history? I kind of feel it's trending that way.
I think Grubb. I think the difference is that we didn't take Grubb ahead of like an all-pro center. You know what I mean? It was like
that's a fair point.
We took a flyer on the guy. Mike McDonald kind of got the ball rolling late, and to everyone's defense, like we all were like, hey, the ceiling could be super high, and the floor could be super low. It's one or the other, and we all know how it worked out. So I think it's going to be one of those names where you sort of just slowly forget as time goes by. I think D's linked with let's not even mention his name. So
all right, guys. Well, let's pivot to this. This came out today. So Mike Sando's QB tier list. So he does this every year, and I think Mike does a really good job. He pulls a whole bunch of NFL executives, coaches, and stuff to kind of build an accurate representation of the different tiers of NFL quarterbacks. And so what we'll do right now is we'll bring up the full tier that Mike put out there, and I will take off this banner so it does not block it. So as we can see, guys, you kind of, at the very bottom, I'll get rid of the other banner because it's blocking things, and I apologize to our viewers for that. So there we go. And so with that being said, tier 1, you've got kind of the names we expect. You got Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lamar Jackson. The interesting thing for me was Matthew Stafford being up there over Justin Herbert and some of those guys that they threw Matthew Stafford into that. I thought he'd be in that second tier for quarterbacks. And then obviously tier 2, Daniels, Herbert, Goff, CJ Stroud, Hurts, Mayfield, Prescott, Jordan Love, Ryan's guy that he loves, Brock Purdy, and then your third tier, which are guys that can. So basically, your first tier is guys that can win you games purely on them being on your roster. Guys in the second tier are guys that can still do that, but just not nearly as consistently and need some weapons. This third tier here, that kind of light orange yellow color, is guys that can win you games, but really need to have a good supporting cast around them to do it. They're not just going to carry the team on their own. So you got Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Bo Nix, and Sam Darnold are tied at 20. Drake May, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins. And then that last group is kind of guys that you're kind of looking for the answer. You're not really sure they're guys that are going to hold it down. Russell, Fields, Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Daniel Jones, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson, Spencer Rattler. And the last one there is a stopgap is Kenny Pickett. I'm surprised he even made that list. What do you guys make of this list first off before we get into the Sam Darnold portion of it? Mookie, what did you make of Mike Sando's list?
Stafford still being there at 5th is pretty interesting because at this rate with his back, I have a feeling he might not be ranked at all next year. So Matthew, if you need to take time and heal your back, do another Sleep Number commercial, like rest that thing and let Jimmy G take control of the offense. But the gap between Mahomes and Lamar, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, it is so tight. And that's the elite of the elite. You got Mahomes has won 3 Super Bowls. Burrow's been to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen's won MVP. Lamar's won MVP. And then Stafford's won a Super Bowl as well. So that's your top tier. Kyler being at 15 as in the top of tier 3, that is kind of generous to me. I'm not against taking Purdy over Murray at this point, but I feel like Murray is living a little bit more on reputation than anything else. Kirk Cousins also still being tier 3. No, like the Kirk we saw last year, that dude is not a viable starter in this league anymore. That Achilles probably wrecked him. But as far as the concept of Darnold being in tier 3 when he was tier 4 last year, more than reasonable. The one thing that you do notice about the tier 1 and tier 2 quarterbacks, I think that the bulk of them have at least made a conference championship game or have won a playoff game already. So Herbert's the only one of this list not won a playoff game. Purdy's been to a Super Bowl, Love's won a playoff game, Dak's won a couple, Mayfield's won a two playoff games. In fact, Hertz has won a Super Bowl, and it was a Super Bowl MVP. So for the Seahawks to contend, they need Darnold to be in that tier 2 or play like a tier 2 quarterback. With Geno, I think that he could have been a tier 2 quarterback, and I'm sure there would be some squabbling over whether or not a better supporting cast would have made Geno a tier 2 quarterback in the eyes of coaches. But talking about Darnold specifically, if the running game is good, if he can stay on schedule, if the Seahawks defense can build upon last year's successes, then I think that Darnold can put up stats that may not be as gaudy as the Vikings season, but enough where you're comfortable with putting him in maybe that 13-14 range. Because without it, if he stays in tier 3, Seattle is not going to be contending this year or the next year. Like the pattern you saw there with that tiers list, you got to be in the top 2 or you're not making a deep championship run. It's just not happening. You don't have to be elite. As we've seen with Jaylen Herz, and I'm sorry, Eagles fans, if there are any Eagles fans watching this, I'm not going to say Jaylen Herz is now the best quarterback in the history of the NFL now that he's won a Super Bowl, because they've been super. I swear they were ready to get rid of him 2 years ago, and now it's like we're defending Jaylen to the death. But we've seen guys like Goff and Purdy and Garoppolo, when he was a better starter, make these deep runs and make the Super Bowl and come close to winning it. So, yes, of course, Mahomes is one of one, but to make a deep championship, a run to at least a conference championship game, I'm totally fine with being having a tier 2 quarterback. That's pretty much what Russ was. So if you've got the supporting cast and you have a guy with that special quality in him, like as we see with Hertz, yeah, you can win a Super Bowl. Now with Darnold, we're looking for that extra quality. If you can find that, then great. So yeah, I'm not up in arms over this list the way I was up in arms with that ESPN list over, long-term futures. Like that was, we don't need to discuss that, but this QB tiers list, we're kind of splitting hairs with a lot of stuff here, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with how the coaches and scouts ranked the quarterbacks here.
I'll say real quick with the Stafford thing. Stafford's a dog, man. Like I know he's older. And I know, like you said, he could be a year away. But I mean, you take that away, and everyone with the equal playing field. I think if this was a list of like, who would you want your roster for the next 5 years? Maybe he's not in that 5th spot. But I just think even that run that the Rams made last year was impressive, and I think he's been getting counted out, and all of a sudden it's like, man, he's still there, because I think he's an absolute dog, and I think maybe having him over Herbert. I think sometimes Herbert is a bit of the opposite. I think he's got all the talent in the world. He's still got to, like you said, let's win it. Let's win it when it matters. I think it's time, and I think Matt Stafford continues to prove that he can be that guy. I think when it's playoff time, I agree with Mike. Give me Stafford still in a big time game. So I mean, I think that's just so invaluable. I love Baker still. He's getting the respect he deserves now. Getting close to that top 10. That's awesome. And yeah, Jay Love at 13, like Bryce says, I still think he's still got some work to do, but I think he's still got a lot of young talent. And then the Sam thing, yeah, like you said, where he is, he moved up a tier, and he had a great year, but yeah, the Kyler thing a little insane. The Penix thing, Penix low, right? Kirk ahead of Penix. But we can nitpick any list. I think it's a pretty solid list. And I think Gino and Sam, Bryce, I don't know if you want to touch this list because I know we're going to segue over to sort of diving in a little deeper with the two, our former quarterback.
Yeah. So
what do you think overall, man?
So I'll put up the thing here on Sam, and this is kind of the breakdown on what they put on with Sam here. So it basically shows kind of in the bottom left the tiers over time. He started out as a tier 3, dropped down into tier 4 the last 3 seasons, and now has spiked back up, obviously, after this past season with the Vikings. But the interesting thing here is it says Seahawks swapped out Geno Smith for the younger, less expensive Darnold. Did they upgrade? One exec said, I think Geno operates at a higher level, especially in critical moments. An offensive coach said Sam's 2-minute stuff versus Geno's 2-minute stuff. That is where Geno separates himself. Darnold out-dueled Smith in Seattle last season. I was there for that game. Tossing 3 touchdowns, including the game winner in the final 4 minutes. As Minnesota beat the Seahawks, Darnold had no interceptions. Smith had 2. Sam, when you put the pieces around him, has a higher ceiling. Another voter said, this is wild to say, but Geno is maybe better if your team is bad. Sam is better if your team is good. Now, that's a snippet. The rest of this article goes, Smith could be the higher variance player by this way of thinking. Geno can look great and you can win a game you should not win, but you're also going to lose 2 or 3 games against teams that are the same as you because he throws a pick in the end zone, plays blind, doesn't see it, the voter added. Sam, when the team is bad, you're going to feel like blank, this guy is limited and we can't overcome it. But when your team is good, you're going to operate really, really well. Others think Darnold is well suited to play in coordinator Clint Kubiak's system, partly because of his familiarity with it. But there's no consensus yet that Seattle has found a long-term successor to Smith. I think one executive goes, I think Smith starts 1 year and then they go with the young kid, Jaylen. Darnold's poor finish with the Vikings lingered in the minds of many voters. I like Darnold, but the end of the season killed him for me. So I find that really interesting because the thing for me that really is kind of in that whole write-up there is Geno is a better quarterback when your team is bad. Sam can be the better quarterback for you when your team is good. And that's what I think is really kind of maybe the thinking behind John Schneider and Mike McDonald, all the changes they made this offseason with the DK being gone, the Tyler Lockett, now Geno. Some people may not see it, but with what they brought in with Clint Kubiak and the pieces they brought in with Cooper Kupp and Sam Darnold and some of the, Gray Zabel on the O-line and some of these other pieces, I think they feel they put with this defense that they've already got that we know is going to probably play at an elite level. You might be able to have that higher ceiling with Sam because he's not going to, as the one, scout said, you're not going to have the turnovers and plays that are blind that Geno had. And we saw those last year too, flourishing in a lot. We think back in the game that always stands out in my mind that if we had won that game, we probably would have made the playoffs, is that home game versus the Rams and the 2 interceptions there that killed us. That to me, it sticks like a sore thumb. And it's the fact that those are the certain moments, and again, like they said, in the Minnesota game, Darnold, no interceptions, Geno had 2. It was the amount of turnover rate we saw at points with Geno, and there's the good and the bad with both of these guys. I don't think it's necessarily, we got a massive upgrade or a massive downgrade moving on from either one and acquiring the other. I think it's more going to be how does the rest of the team and the scheme and everything else operate now that we have going forward.
The line about Sam is better if your team is good and Geno's better if your team is bad. So I was on Vegas radio, the Raiders flagship station, when the trade happened. And I said that Geno's a floor raiser. And I think I stick with that. I think that the Raiders are going to be better this year. I think Chip Kelly is going to be a very good offensive coordinator for Geno. And with the weapons that they've got, with Bowers and Genty and Jacoby Myers, I think is still a good receiver and underappreciated one of that. They can have more success than they've had in years past. But have we really seen Geno with a good team yet to make that conclusion? Because 2022 team was 9-8, 2023 9-8, 2024 was 10-7. But were any of those teams, can we quantify them as good? Because the first half of the 2024 season, that defense, when they actually had to play better competition than Skylar Thompson, was bad enough that they decided we're going to cut both linebackers or trade them in the middle of the season, or trade one, cut the other. The offensive line, we know in 2024 was as bad as it ever got in the Geno era, and the running game pretty much tanked. And then it kind of had like this cascading effect where Geno was turning the ball over more than he did the first couple of seasons. So I'm not sure about that line. I think I kind of understand it where, Darnold had that year with Minnesota where, yeah, they got the best defense of the league or close to it. And they've got, when healthy, a pretty good offensive line and a good enough running game, nothing outstanding. And Darnold can have the season that he had, also with an outstanding play caller in Kevin O'Connell. Geno only wish that he could have had a defense as good as Minnesota's over a full season or had an offensive line better than that. He had decent play calling with Waldron at times, but we had our frustrations with him and then forget about Grupp. So I think the thing with the Seahawks in the Geno era, and I tweeted this earlier, so Seattle's had winning records over the last 3 seasons, and they're tied for 11th in win percentage at that time across all NFL teams, all 32. But of the top 16 teams in win percentage at that time, they had the 3rd worst strength of victory. So sub 400. So they were winning games mostly against bad opposition. And their point differential during that span is minus 25. And the only team worse than that are the Rams, who have had a sub 500 record over the last 3 seasons because they were bad in 2022 and injured. So that tells you right there that, yes, they were winning, but they were treading water. They weren't beating good teams consistently, and they were not convincingly beating bad teams. And in fact, sometimes they were losing to them. So with the Seahawks and with Sam Darnold, the prove it to me, go beat good teams because you're going to play good teams. There's no way around it. It's going to happen. And beat bad teams convincingly. And that means no 5-point, 7-point wins, no nail biters. Like win so comfortably that we can fantasize about playing Milrod for the whole 4th quarter. Like that's the type of football I want to see out of the Seahawks. So yeah, with that line about Darnold, I think that the circumstances benefited him. And I think with Geno, in a way, that the circumstances with at least the 2022 offense was a benefit to him. But Darnold being younger, I guess, is the higher ceiling, and also that he was a higher draft pick. So if Kubiak and McDonald can simulate the environment that is closer to Minnesota, he's not going to be like for like because we don't have Jefferson or Addison. And we don't have, presumably, Kubiak may not be at O'Connell's level as a play caller and as a schemer. But having something close, something familiar, I think can provide some continuity for Darnold as opposed to this hard shift from what Waldron was running to what Grubb was running that kind of flustered Geno and the offense as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, real quick, I think my takeaway too, I mean, I know what you're saying as far as it's hard to evaluate that comment with Geno and, the teams he's been with and played with and play callers and so forth. But I look at it like you kind of you look at what he's done and you see, I mean, Bryce brings up the interceptions with the Rams, just the mental errors that we've kind of continuously seen with him. And when I look at going into this season, I'd say, who would I rather have under center? And it really, to me, and I loved his time in Seattle. I didn't want Geno Smith to be under center again, even with Kubiak, even with an improved offensive line. I have no confidence in some of his mental game. I really, that's sort of where I sit. And I think, like you said, he's a floor raiser. And I believe that. I think he will make the Raiders better. But I think if you're kind of at this stage now where, you're turning into potentially a top 5 defense, you got a better offensive scheme. And I'm not saying Sam's going to light the world on fire, but I think there's going to be less mistakes with him under center, and that's just how I look at it. So I kind of see where the comment might be coming from as far as, okay, if your team's more ready to go, who would you rather put under there? And again, like if you look at Sando's list, they're close as far as the tiers. No one's saying he's a top 10 guy. But I think in this situation, for me, I would choose Darnold, and just because I just think he is going to make less mistakes with a better team and result in, potentially, bringing this team up to the next level. Because again, I don't think he has to light the world on fire for this team to be really good. I just think it's got to be really mistake-free football.
Well, if he can make fewer mistakes is one thing, but if he's in an environment where he is essentially forced into in other words, he doesn't have to be put in situations where he could make a mistake. So like the last 2 weeks of the season with Minnesota, those are unmitigated disasters. The Detroit game and the Rams game got blown out, and he did make a ton of mistakes. But if you have situations like for much of his time in Minnesota where he's playing with leads, playing with multi-score leads, something the Seahawks rarely did with Geno. It's not Geno's fault directly. There are a whole lot of factors there. If there are situations where he can kind of put up stat lines like early career Russ did, minus all the rushing yards, I'm cool with that. He doesn't have to be an all-pro. As I said, if he can be like touching that tier 2 line, then Seattle's got a shot. Anything below that, and that limits the ceiling of this team. So, yeah, if the situation suits itself where Darnold can not have to drop back 40, 45 times out of necessity, then I don't think that there will be a huge drop-off. But if there's a case where he has to play from behind a little more than he did in Minnesota, then we could see some trouble. That'll be a real test of his mettle. Ideally, he kind of has that, not Geno trajectory, but kind of closer to the Mayfield trajectory. Now, Baker, his reputation got a little bit through the mud. He took the team to the playoffs in 2020 in Cleveland. So he's
people forget about that, man. People forget about that. That's why I never understood. I was just like, this guy is a baller and a gamer, right? But
yeah, Baker was, and they were on the same team briefly, Baker and Darnold. But if Darnold can start putting up really good numbers consistently, it doesn't have to be like superstar numbers. Then you've got something there. Baker's been a victim of lousy defenses in Tampa Bay. I don't think Sam is going to have that problem in Seattle. So like he's in a better situation than he was in the previous stops. In Minnesota, very good situation. In Seattle, it should be on paper a good situation.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, let's move into some viewer Q&A here. You guys are good for that, or anyone need to bug out?
I'm gonna bug out in a couple, but let's. I'll hang out for a couple Q&As. Let's jump into them.
Sure, all right, here we go. So first one, this is from Ryan Young. What edge options will there be? Any news on who they're eyeing besides Clowney? Pass rush was absent besides a few reps from Tyreek Smith. I haven't really heard of them outside of like. There was obviously when we were down there, Mookie, there was the whole Parsons rumor mill just flying amok. And, I still think Jadeveon Clowney is the most viable option for Seattle at this point. I don't think the Micah Parsons is as real as some people would like it to be. And I think that, they're comfortable if they go and get Jadeveon because they're not going to have to break the bank to do it. He's not going to be playing, 80%. And the other thing I'll say too, when we're talking about edge, depending on where you're positioning in Mike McDonald's defense, Jared Ivey looked really good in that preseason game. And I know he's going up against third teamers, but he really did pop off the screen and was constantly causing problems. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. DeMarcus Lawrence still there. I think personally, Jadeveon Clowney, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't wait till maybe they might have a deal in place and they're just waiting for a point in time to sign it or something. Maybe Jadeveon's on vacation still. Who knows?
Tyreek Smith definitely impressed to the point where I think he's got a legit shot to make the team. Not entirely because of him, but also because we don't know if Chenna is going to start the season on the PUP list. It seems like it's going to be that way based on reading between the lines with Mike McDonald. But yeah, Clowney's probably one of the top options. I do wonder if he'd be a little redundant with Lawrence, but the thing is, Clowney can be a little more of a traditional outside linebacker, whereas Lawrence is still just a guy with his hand to the dirt as a traditional defensive end. So, Clowney would be there just to take 20, 25 snaps, I think. He's not going to be a high-end productivity pass rusher. Mafe and Hall and Lawrence are essentially going to be your main three guys, and Clowney would just be a rotational player. And if they don't sign Clowney, then I think that's a vote of confidence in Tyreek Smith and maybe Jared Ivey, but certainly Smith at the very least.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. I think, Tyreek Smith really did impress in that game for me. He was constantly bringing pressure off, and again, the Raiders were starting a lot of their starters out there. So it was interesting to see. Here's one from Sonny. He goes, is the O-line still a concern? Mookie, for you, is the O-line still a concern?
Yes, because I have to see it in the regular season against live bullets. So like the Raiders first team playing one series, that's whatever. But let's keep in mind that Josh Jones was in for Cross and Oluwatimi didn't play. and he should be back pretty soon. But I want to see the first team O-line and how they're going to do, especially against San Francisco's remade defensive front. You still got to deal with Nick Bosa. They cut Hargrave, and they moved up from some other guys. They drafted Alfred Collins, CJ West, whatever. But and even Pittsburgh week 2, you got to deal with TJ Watt. Maybe not Cam Hayward if this holdout is a real thing. But you're going to have some significant tests those first couple of weeks. So it's a concern until it isn't. So I'm not worried that, oh my God, this is going to be the worst O-line in the league. But I do want to see it beyond just preseason when they're really going all out. But I'm cautiously optimistic that they can be at least closer to league average than the really poor stuff that we've seen in years past.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, again, live bullets will be the key thing. And when teams are actually doing stunts and blitzes, and we'll see some of that, obviously, with Robert Saleh and what he wants to do down there in San Francisco. And it'll be a test going up against, Bosa and that San Francisco defense week 1 to see where they're actually at with a lot of things. Let's look at this one. K-Jab asks, how has Bradford improved in your opinion? I think we touched on it a little bit, but for me, it's the body composition. It's I would say, not leaning, not jumping at certain things or lunging. He seems a little bit more comfortable. And I think it's to a point you made, Mookie, with having a steady center and now Abe Lucas being there, a steady right tackle. I think he feels a little bit more comfortable that if he needs help, he will get it from one or the other.
Yeah, and the other thing is I expect him to either provide help or get help. In other words, more dual blocks in the run game. No more everybody out on an island. Good luck, y'all. We're going 5 out wide receiver. Like that's going to be kept to a minimum this year. I can promise you that. So yeah, I think Bradford has looked a little bit better. Again, we'll see what happens this week. I'm assuming that he's going to play, but the way that it's gone, it doesn't sound like the way McDonald sounded so exasperated last year when he said the right guard situation is what it is. And that's a direct quote. Like, my God, I don't really have any good options here. He's been a little more effusive in his praise of Bradford this year. So, yeah, you pretty much touched on it, that he doesn't look as, reaching and being out of position. I think he was on one play, but it's going to happen to everybody. But what I'm curious to see is how he's going to deal with bull rushes. What's going to happen when he gets driven back? How is his footwork? That sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that Bradford should be better, but if it's not all pro better, not concerned. As long as he's not bottom 10 percentile bad, then Seattle can work with that as long as the other guys are at least a plus.
No, I agree with that. And here's one from Jason. He goes, I really think the reactions to this one game, Damian and Hani, are over the top. Damian had moments of looking good. I will give him the fact it's his first NFL game. So I'm going to be really interested to see how he bounces back in this Chiefs game, because I know he's going to tote the rock quite a bit. But I also want to see if George Hani can double up, for say, on what he did versus the Raiders. Because at the indications out of camp and from the people that we know that are there more frequently than we are, Mookie, George Hani really has stepped up, and Martinez has kind of been an up and down case throughout camp a lot of the way. What are your thoughts about the maybe overreactions to game one?
Like I said earlier, it's not a game one thing for me exclusively, because I mentioned the fumble that Martinez had. Dan has mentioned that he had some drops in some pass reps, receiving back reps. I think that his pass pro will get there. I think he's too physical to not be at least competent in pass pro. But Hani is also somebody who I think gets into it in pass pro, such that Walker might be the worst pass pro guy. Like Charbonnet is really, really good at that, and Hani looks like he likes to get down and dirty on that front too. But with Hani, he has an advantage in that he's got special teams experience, not just as a guy in coverage, but also as a guy who can return kicks. And then with Martinez, he is, as much as I vouch for him even way back before the draft, he did not look one bit elusive or explosive. Like, and he was playing with the same line as Hani at times, but he just kind of looked there, just unremarkable, unable to drive through contact. That was a bit disappointing to me, but we'll see how it goes in this Chiefs game. But I do need to see a little bit more out of Martinez to be confident that he can make the roster, because I didn't totally touch on this, but it is very possible Seattle cuts their last 4 draft picks. And that means Richmond Cable Dew, Martinez, and Ricky White. I think White's going to need a miracle to stay on this team. And then Richmond and Cable do bubble right now. Martinez, I thought was a greater lock than I thought, but now it's looking a little dicier. It depends on whether they want to keep 4 running backs. So we'll see how it goes with Martinez, but it's not just a one-game thing for me. It's just some other things that I noticed in reports and also from what we saw in camp that Hani is impressing guys. And he was impressive last year. He was in the competition with Kenny Mack. And then McIntosh was able to get the edge over him. But in this instance, McIntosh was also a guy who could return kicks. Martinez is not that guy. So I think Holani's future determines a lot of things with not just Martinez, but also whether they even keep Steven Sims. Like, do you need Steven Sims on the roster if Holani can return kicks? You can just practice squad Sims. So Holani, to me, is going to be the most interesting guy, or intriguing guy to watch on offense in terms of how he can affect running back and special teams over the next couple of weeks.
Agreed. Kick up comes in with any chance Milrod starts next season. I would think it would really come down to how much he progresses, and you see in OTAs that progression, and even throughout the season, and how bad Sam Darnold were to play this year. I think are kind of the determining factors in that decision happening. I don't think Seattle's in any rush to play Jaylen Milrod. I think, John Schneider, we know his background. He's now got a quarterback that he can actually have a QB room where he can sit and let him develop. And the thing is the whole Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson, Jaylen Milrod, Sam Darnold comparison that was going on earlier. Russell was a way more refined passer coming out of college. His last year at Wisconsin, he set the record for completion percentage in the NCAA in a history for a single season. Jaylen hasn't done that. So I think that's a big caveat in this. Yes, Jaylen's, I would say, many times the athlete than Russell is in a lot of ways, but I don't see a path for Jaylen to start unless Sam Darnold completely falls on his face this year.
I think it's possible that he starts next season if Darnold flops, he's gone. That doesn't mean that the Seahawks don't draft a quarterback next year anyway. Like if they like somebody in the first round just as much as they like Milrod, then they can get involved in that, and Schneider can really go all out as far as, I mean, he's got his contract extension. Now he's going to start drafting all the quarterbacks in my fanfic world. But I think that it's unlike he's not starting this year unless Locke also gets hurt. Like I'd be surprised if Milrod starts this year, but next year, I think there's a decent chance that he could get one game. In my ideal world, Seattle has locked up the 1 seed, and they can rest starters, and we get to see Jaylen Milrod against the 49ers in Week 18. I'm not counting on that, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, but he's going to start at some point, I would think, but it's not going to be this year. I think there is a chance next year. His best chance would be 2 seasons from now, just because I don't think Darnold's going to be a mega flop. If he's good enough, then they'll go year 2, and then they'll make their decision after year 2.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat with you there, Mookie. Ian Victor, who's kind of our chat supervisor as well. Appreciate you always doing that, Ian. He goes, Tyrone Broden should make the practice squad. Have a receiver develop and grow with Milrod. Those two have a good connection throughout camp. I can't disagree with that. I think there's a way to get Broden through. And the one thing I'll say about Broden that was really interesting to me watching him, Mookie, those couple days we were down there, is for the guy that had so many drop issues. Like when they initially brought him in, I kind of was like, okay, he's a camp body. He's kind of an interesting prospect of his height and his speed, but he has all these drops. So I wonder really how good he's going to be. And then watching him catch and move, he gets in and out of his breaks pretty good for a guy that's that size and height, but he is such a natural hands catcher. Like I don't think I've seen him drop a pass that is purely catchable. Like we're not talking something that's greatly contested or, way out of place. Most of the time, Broden comes down with the ball, and he did it in the game even at points. So what are your thoughts on Tyrone Broden and whether or not he's worth a practice squad stash?
Oh, 100%. He's going to be a practice squad stash. I know people always freak out. Like this guy's not going to get through waivers. This guy's the percentage of players who get waived on cut down day who then get claimed off waivers, probably not 20%. I bet you it's even lower than that. It's not a thing. So there might be a few that get claimed that you go, damn, wish you could have kept him. But like Jamie Sheriff last year, he got claimed. got cut by Carolina day one, and now he's back in Seattle. So, you don't want to overreact to that. But I think that Broden is going to be able to pass through waivers and make the practice squad. It's funny. Seattle, we talked about Seattle's receiver depth earlier, and there are 3-4 guys who have got legit practice squad possibility. So Broden, Ricky White, Cody White, and Derek Young if he doesn't make it. And if Derek doesn't make it, it's just purely a numbers game where Seattle might be willing to keep 5 instead of 6. So with Broden, yeah, he does impress me. 6'5" guy. He moves pretty smoothly. You track the ball pretty well when we saw him at practice, and then it's so far translated to game stuff. So we haven't been seeing the drops because he had like a 20% drop rate or something like that in his last year at Arkansas. And you go, man, that's normally something you don't magically fix when you get to the pros, but so far so good. So I'm liking Broden, and I'm really liking his chemistry with Milrod. Every backup quarterback or second or third string, they seem to have that guy to connect with. So with Sam Howell, it was Aesop Winston, a guy who, by the way, I'm pretty sure cleared waivers and is not in the league right now as much as people wanted him on the team. So with Broden, I like his chances.
So one here from Kickup, he goes, hot take UDFA that makes the roster, if any. Well, I think we just talked about one, which is Tyrone Broden. The other one for me is Jared Ivey. I think Jared Ivey is in a very good position to make this team as a UDFA. I like what he did. He'll obviously have to replicate it and do it again against Kansas City. But is there anyone else out of those two guys, Mookie, that stands out for you out of this UDFA class do you think has a legitimate shot at making this team?
That's probably it. I don't think this is a great UDFA class for Seattle. I mean, one thing about the Pete UDFA classes, when it was Pete and John together, you could tell when they were hyped on a certain undrafted free agent. I think that there's been some liking from McDonald about Jared Ivey, but otherwise they've been pretty mum on that front. So like Connor O'Toole maybe has a slight shot to make it, but I feel like it's probably just Ivey with the best chance. The corners so far, Cam Alexander got let go, and I think at the moment that he got on the pump fake touchdown, I said he's not making it the second week. And then Waxter, I don't think has been as good as advertised. And De'Aaron Jackson, another guy who I'd be shocked if he actually made it through the preseason. So there's just not a lot of UDFA gems this year, but I don't really care if the draft picks are as long as the draft picks are fine. It's not something I'm going to lose sleep over.
Yeah, I know this feels like one of the more weaker UDFA classes for Seattle, which is something they've usually been pretty good at. But on the flip side, usually that means our back end of our draft classes haven't necessarily been the greatest in most cases. So
yes.
Here's one from Brendan Myers. He goes, is Chenna being out in the regular season a foregone conclusion at this point? I would say yes. I don't expect to see Chenna until week 5 at the earliest, in my opinion.
Yeah, same. I know that when we saw him last week, he had a band on. So did Riley Mills. But we know Riley Mills ain't coming back until at least mid-season, and he had his injury sooner. But I think Chenna had his surgery around the same time as Mills tore his ACL. So that timeline, I think, lends itself to Nwosu probably missing the first 4 games of the regular season, which is going to affect the initial 53-man roster. There might be some guys who would ordinarily not have a chance to make it, who might have that chance, like a Jared Ivey, because of guys like Nwosu not being available to play.
So here's one from Herbicide. He goes, Knight better be ready in 2 weeks. We are way too thin at inside linebacker, in my opinion. I'm going to be worried if Knight's not ready to go, and I think they'll need to add somebody because Josh Ross is still, I believe, coming off some sort of injury himself, and he's not – and surgery, so he's got to kind of come back into the fold here. Patrick O'Connell and Drake Thomas, I think, are fine. You know, to your point about Jackson, I don't think he makes it through. We just signed a linebacker today. The thing for me with this linebacking group is I think it really comes down to how much do they view their sub packages with DeAnthony Bell and Nick Emenwari. Because I believe it was today Dan was saying, or yesterday, that Dan and Corbin Smith reported that Nick Emenwari was playing a lot of weak side linebacker in a lot of different sets for them today or the other day with with Knight being out. I think there's a chance they may only carry 3 potentially. Maybe they carry a 4th if Knight's still nursing the injury. But I think there's a chance they carry 3 and use Bell and Emenwari as their other linebacker options in certain situations. What are your thoughts, Mookie?
Yeah, they could use Emenwari. They could use DeAnthony Bell if it comes to wanting another safety who could maybe be a backer. So in a pinch, but yeah, the linebacker depth is worrisome. But as long as Knight's ready, not gonna freak out. But if he isn't ready, I can trust Drake Thomas. I'm not sure about O'Connell yet. I think O'Connell's got the edge on Ross when the final 53 comes. But if you get to linebacker 4, I don't care which team you're on, you probably are going to have issues. So really, it's just the top 3 to me that I care about. Your 2 starters, and then who's your third option? So like Malcolm Smith, heroic Super Bowl MVP winner, filled in for I think it was Bobby got hurt during the Super Bowl season, so he missed a few games, and Malcolm had to deputize. But I guess Drake Thomas can be that Austin Calitro, Brock Coyle, John Radigan. We could go through the list of linebacker depth. Will Herring. So we could go on and on. These are people who are going to be in the SB Nation in 5 trivia game, I'm sure, at some point.
Oh boy. All right. Divine Comedy comes in with, should they go all in and try and get a blue chipper on one side of the ball? Darnold will never be cheaper than this year. With the Jaylen Milrod factor, to our point that we were already talking about, they're kind of in a luxury where they've got about 4 years of having potentially a quarterback on a cheap deal if they ever do want to go make that trade. Because if Darnold doesn't work out, they pivot to the rookie deal of Jaylen Milrod. I don't necessarily think they're in a situation where they have to go get one now because Darnold's deal is the cheapest it will be at this point this year.
I don't know who they would get on one side of the ball. Like McLaurin. One, I expect McLaurin to sign the deal with Washington. He's going to get his contract done. I'm pretty sure. This is all kind of grandstanding. And the second bit is, even if McLaurin was a legitimate trade target, I don't think the Seahawks would be going after him. So, like, he's older than Metcalf, who they didn't want to pay, and then Metcalf wanted out. And, like, you already have Kupp and Smith and Jigba and potentially somebody out there in Horton. So, McLaurin's awesome, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he factors into really a long-term plan, knowing how receivers age after they hit 30. But if it's on defense, it pretty much has to be Parsons, right? Or Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think Tibbs might be somebody who gets on the block in midseason. And Parsons, if you've seen, Jerry Jones has got some Netflix documentary out, and apparently the Parsons thing came up in the trailer. So as far as I'm concerned, this is all just one big television preview or streaming preview. So I'm going to stop the photoshops of Micah Parsons at SeaTac. So it'd be cool to get a blue chipper, but no, somebody in the comments said trade Christian Haynes or Lamea to the Eagles while Landon Dickerson is hurt for Jordan Davis. And you couldn't run that in Madden. So you're not going to run it in real life. Unless we drug Howie Roseman, I don't think that is going to. The league might step in and veto that.
Rockman Drums comes in. Can you guys name our starting O-line game 1 last year? This lineup should be a ton better. And yes, I can. Left to right, Charles Cross, Lincoln Tomlinson, Connor Williams. Right guard we had was Anthony Bradford. And our right tackle started that game as George Fant. And then he got injured, like 3 plays into that game. And we had Stone Forsythe out there playing right tackle. So that was that starting offensive line. And to think, I would agree, Rockman. I think our O-line will be a little bit better this year. And Brandon piggybacks off that with the coaches couldn't name the starting O-line last year. That's fair, Brandon. That is very fair, Brandon, that I don't think they could.
Their names I wish to forget.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, one of them will be starting again. Let's go here and let's see what else we got. We got a couple more minutes here. Mookie, one thing I did want to ask you about that's not in the comments here necessarily is, how do you feel about our nose tackle situation? It's been a big point of controversy and discussion within the Seahawks community for the last few years. Jonathan Hankins was asked about, I believe, today in Mike McDonald's press conference, and he kind of said, well, his back's still bothering him, and we don't know when we're going to see him, hopefully soon, but, we don't know. Do you think this is more of a wait-and-see approach, potentially, with if Peely and Bohanna actually pan out and actually are good, that we may not actually see Jonathan Hankins until later on in the season, if at all?
Yeah, you and I were talking about it either earlier today or yesterday, that I no longer think it's a lock for Hankins to just make the team, because, one, he could have been signed much sooner. And, well, our lights flickered for no reason there. But no, we're not going to have a power outage my turn, because I know we had it with you, one of the very first Pulse of the Hawks. But
very true,
yeah.
we did.
I think that Hankins is on like a $2 million deal with a $300,000 signing bonus. It is not difficult to get off the Hankins contract. The only thing you're giving up is the signing bonus, because that's dead cap. But Quinton Bohanna and Brandon Peely are both showing out in camp and so far in their preseason reps. And they're much younger. Hankins is 35 years old. And I know that nose tackles can play pretty well deep into their 30s, but it wasn't like Hankins was some incredibly important piece at nose tackle for the Seahawks last year. In fact, as the defense got better, Hankins was playing less. I think that Hankins was a hedge as far as like, we'll have the veteran option, but if any of these camp bodies can do something, then we can just move on from Hankins altogether. And I think that at the very least, one of Peely or Bohanna is going to be on this roster. Peely's a bigger body, but I feel like Bohanna's made actually a couple of more impressive plays. It's nose tackle, and it's not going to be like a high priority position, but just somebody who can eat up space, take on blockers, be impactful in the run defense, provide at least some level of pass rush. So, yeah, I think it's possible that Hankins ends up not playing a snap at all for the Seahawks, the way that this is going, especially if his back doesn't heal up, because it went from, yeah, he's starting on PUP, he's going to be back soon, to, well, it's been 2.5 weeks of training camp and he ain't back. So, no pun intended.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll just jump on with that too, talking about injuries, is, Jean Charles isn't back yet. Mm-hmm. And that's another guy that we're kind of like, well, he was there day one of training camp and then he's been injured. That cornerback room, Shaquille Griffin's coming in, but Nehemiah Pritchett impressed me. And what we saw at camp, and then what we saw in the Raiders game, like that interception he made was very impressive. The fact that he baited Aiden O'Connell, who's played quite a few games in the NFL, into throwing that. And that was something we didn't see from Nehemiah Pritchett last year. And I think, the solid four corners right now are Witherspoon, Woolen, Job, and Pritchett. And then I think Griffin's your fifth guy and maybe could be your veteran, security blanket. If one of them were to go down, you at least have that veteran that can come in and play. I don't know. It's a foregone conclusion that Griffin, because of how much time he's missed and how well Pritchett's played, he's going to be able to make up that ground necessarily in the last couple of weeks here of training camp.
It really depends on whether they want to keep four corners or five. And, could Eamon Worry play a little bit of boundary corners? I know Griff has been banging on about for months that he could be a boundary corner option. But, Griffin is having to play catch up a bit. And his contract is a little bit more hefty than Hankins. So, like Pritchett's, and they ran a little inverted look. And you had Bell coming in on the rush, and that forced O'Connell into like a panic throw. And Pritchett's able to undercut. That's a beautiful play. That's sicko stuff from Mike McDonald in the second quarter of a first preseason game. And you love to see that, because we saw that while Griffin was out, Pritchett was getting some work with the ones. Or at least like a snap here and there. So I think that's, look, after anybody below Griffin, very, very minimal shot to make the team based on what we've seen in camp and also in the preseason game. But I think you've got four at bare minimum. I think Pritchett's was a little bit shakier, and why I think they signed Griffin. But you've got Witherspoon, you got Job, we've got Woolen, now you got Pritchett. If Griffin makes the team, cool. If he doesn't, then thanks for the brief reunion. But I think that was a good thing for Pritchett to have a good camp and good preseason, because the way he looked last regular season was a bit disappointing, but a little bit different this time around. And again, growth is not linear. Some guys can look lousy as a rookie and really improve in their second year. Some guys can look great as a rookie, and that's all. They just tap out from there. So you always got to watch. Not everybody has the same XP added after every offseason.
No, that's true. Well, Mookie, I think that's going to wrap up tonight's show. Appreciate everybody that was tuning into it. Always appreciate your guys' comments and your contributions to the show, and keep supporting the show. It allows us to keep doing things like this. But Mookie, what's going on at Field Goals? What do you got coming up?
I am told that John Gilbert has something that is going to upset everybody on Tuesday morning, and he has not even put the draft in our editor. So I can take a wild guess as to what it is, and it might be something to do with offense. But just be on the lookout for that. Some of you in this chat are Field Goals readers, I know. So it's a Gilbert special. And then we'll have some film review, I think, from Alessandra regarding Gray Zabel's performance, which it's hard not to be stoked with the way he looked, even for a couple of series. And then we'll have some game preview stuff and all that for ahead of Friday night lights, Friday night football, the Chiefs and Seahawks. And I know that one of SB Nation's people, the NFL managing editor who oversees me and a bunch of other people, he's a Chiefs fan. He's going to be attending this game, so give him a warm welcome up in the 300 level, because this is his first trip to Lumen Field. And yeah, I'm just hoping it's a good, well-played preseason game. And again, no injuries. Can't keep having that. We're seeing too many in the actual preseason games and in camp. So just hope everybody comes out clean.
Yeah, I know. And over here on the Hawk Zone Rundown, guys, we're going to have Dana O'Gorman on later this week prior to the Chiefs game, which will be fun. So we're going to do a show with Dana talking about the defense and everything. And then we will have our live post-game show either following the Friday game, depending on what time it ends, or it'll be on the Saturday morning. So make sure you guys tune into that live, as we will be doing that throughout the season. And once the games are back to kind of their normal times of 1 o'clock and stuff, the post-game show will follow directly after that, about 30 minutes after the end of the Seahawks game. But outside of that, everyone, make sure you subscribe, like the channel, click the notifications so you don't miss any of the future stuff that will be coming up throughout the season. Also, guys, join our membership program. That's another big way to help out the show and everything. We're going to do some cool content that'll be members only throughout the season. As well, you can find our stuff over on Field Goals with Mookie and the rest of the group there. And I will be definitely making sure, Mookie, I check out what John's going to write, because I'm going to be really excited to see what he comes out with and how much it could potentially go either way within the Seahawks community on their opinions of it. But with that being said, everyone, have a good night. And Mookie, as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.